And Hungary believes allocating 50 billion euros to Ukraine from within the EU budget over 5 years is a bad decision.
Orbán and Meloni just delivered a horrific surprise to Brussels. And believe me, nobody in the European Union ever imagined this would happen. Two countries they have spent years underestimating stopped the entire Ukraine funding machine with a single refusal. And it exposed exactly how fragile the system actually is.
The only thing that we really cannot afford is a peace that does not remain.
The European Union keeps telling the world that unity is its greatest strength. Yet anyone paying attention knows the real decisions were always shaped by two capitals, Berlin and Paris. Brussels conveniently ignored its own rule that everything collapses the moment one member state refuses to agree. That rule has been there from the beginning. But everyone acted as if it did not matter because no one was brave enough to test it. Until now.
War is the failure of diplomacy. It should have never happened.
Clarified that it does not foresee sending its soldiers to Ukrainian territory.
That silence finally ended when Italy and Hungary decided they would not treat the decisions of Brussels as commandments.
How to be sure that it won't happen again.
They refused to approve another round of funding for Ukraine, and the refusal did not come with excuses or apologies. They stated clearly that Europe cannot keep destroying its own budgets to rescue a war that has no exit strategy.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán said on Thursday a sensible timeline should be set for any financing for Ukraine.
They stated clearly that they will not allow Brussels to dictate how their economies should function or how much money they must sacrifice on someone else's timetable. They stated clearly that a country has the right to decide its own energy plans, its own budget limits, and its own priorities, without waiting for approval from Berlin or Paris.
But would not approve the use of existing funds.
I understand why this moment shocked the European establishment, because the assumption inside Brussels has always been the same. If Germany speaks, the room listens. If France agrees, the room signs. If smaller countries hesitate, they eventually fall in line because they are afraid of being isolated. Italy and Hungary proved that no country is isolated when its people are behind it.
Convinced that to give Ukraine 15 billion euros from the EU budget for 5 years in which there is no money for this, and by taking out a loan, that's a bad decision.
They did not delay the vote. They did not ask for adjustments. They simply refused to sign. The 65 billion euro package that everyone expected to pass instantly collapsed. And for the first time since the war began, the European Union had to confront a truth it avoided. The system cannot move even 1 inch forward when a single country says no.
They want to give the money to Ukraine from inside the EU budget. Hungary wants to give it outside the EU budget. They have the possibility, if we don't agree on this, to resolve this outside the budget, but don't have the option of resolving this from the EU budget without Hungarian approval.
I watched how quickly the conversation shifted in Brussels. Suddenly, everyone realized that the hierarchy they worshipped was never guaranteed. Italy is not a small, irrelevant voice. It is one of the founding members with a major economy. And once Italy takes a firm position, every country that has been quietly frustrated understands that they can speak too.
More and more people will die, and there is no chance to have a victory on neither side. So this is a war which just deprives many persons from lives without having result.
Hungary has been warning for years that the European Union treats independent thinking like a crime, but no one wanted to repeat that message because they feared backlash. Italy repeating it changed everything, because Brussels cannot silence Italy the way it tried to silence Hungary.
He has now expressed doubts about Italy's participation in the deployment of troops.
The refusal to approve the funding did not come out of spite. It came out of exhaustion. People across Europe are paying higher electricity bills, higher food prices, and higher taxes while being told that Ukraine must always come first, even if their own families cannot keep up with the cost of living. I am not surprised that Italy and Hungary finally said that enough is enough. Their position is simple.
Is that we also have to remind that if we want to reach peace and if we want to guarantee justice, we have to do it united. So
Every country has the right to protect its own economy before it sacrifices money for an endless conflict. Every country has the right to decide how much energy reform it can afford, instead of being forced into unrealistic targets. A European leadership can call this move irresponsible, but ordinary Europeans do not see it that way. They see two countries that finally said what everyone else was too intimidated to say. And let me tell you what irritates me the most, and that is no one other than Volodymyr Zelensky. I understand that Ukraine has a shattered economy, that the war has dragged on since February 2022, and that their cities have been under fire for more than 3 years. I understand desperation. What I do not understand is the entitlement. If you know your state budget cannot survive for even 12 months without external aid, then you do not put yourself in a position where you depend on 27 other countries to keep the lights on.
No. I don't know. You have to ask Orbán, Viktor. Then he was not clear. Typically, Viktor is very clear in his statement. So ask him the follow-up question. What are you talking about?
Yet here he is, month after month, asking Europe for more money, more weapons, and a faster European Union membership, as if households in Europe are not paying the highest inflation rates recorded by Eurostat in 2024 and 2025. He talks about sacrifice, while families in Germany, Italy, and Spain are calculating whether they can afford heating for the winter.
There is no chance to win this war. So therefore, what we should do far more energy invest into to convince everybody that the only solution is ceasefire. And then after the ceasefire, peace talks should start. And then we could back to your point, yeah?
Even worse is the tone. Zelensky demands support as if Europe owes him something, and when a leader questions the cost, he behaves as if that leader has betrayed humanity. Viktor Orbán finally said what everyone else was too afraid to say. He accused Zelensky of using moral blackmail to pressure Europe. And that statement stunned diplomats at the October 2025 Brussels discussions, because no European Union head of government had ever confronted the emotional narrative that Kyiv relies on. Orbán told reporters that Europe cannot be manipulated with guilt and hero speeches, while its own citizens struggle with rising rent, rising fuel prices, and rising food costs.
we will talk about many important topics. The first one is security guarantees, how to be sure that it won't happen again, which is the precondition of every kind of peace.
Giorgia Meloni took a different route, but the message was just as sharp. She directly mocked the fantasy of a unified European army after Emmanuel Macron claimed Europe needed one. Meloni pointed to reality. Russia has roughly 3 million personnel available across active forces and reserves, according to official Russian Defense Ministry figures, while Europe is arguing about how to pay energy bills. She essentially told Brussels that building an army requires stability, resources, and political agreement, none of which Europe currently has. Her point was simple. The European Union cannot afford to act like a military superpower when its own citizens are struggling with cost of living increases that reached double digits in several countries such as Estonia and Hungary during the 2022 to 2023 inflation peak. European voters are now calling endless financial support for the war suicidal rather than heroic, and their frustration is visible on the streets. The real weight behind Orbán's message was the threat he carried. Freezing the 65 billion euro aid package was not a symbolic act. It was a demonstration that Hungary can halt the entire financial machinery of the European Union with a single veto, because unanimous approval is required for major spending decisions. Brussels understood instantly that Orbán was not sabotaging the system. He was redefining its boundaries by proving that the European Union cannot operate if even one state refuses to participate blindly. While Orbán used blunt force, Meloni used strategy. During the same month, Orbán held a one-hour call with Vladimir Putin and then traveled to Florida to meet Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Those moves signaled that Hungary will not take orders from either Brussels or NATO and will decide its alliances independently. After that series of meetings, Orbán repeated his central message on Hungarian media outlets. Hungary will not send Hungarian children to die in foreign wars. He has been consistent since 2022, and he reinforced it again in 2025 without hesitation. Their combined approach created a new political axis inside the European Union. Orbán delivered the heavy hits by rejecting funding, questioning membership, and speaking directly with leaders who make Brussels uncomfortable. Meloni delivered the rational critique by exposing the gap between Europe's rhetoric and Europe's financial reality. Together, they shifted the balance of influence, and leaders across the European Union were forced to recognize that the era of silent compliance had ended.